Welcome to the Argosy podcast. We have as today our guest, Rebecca Stevens from Talent Mobility Experts. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Rebecca, you built a career leading global mobility programs at companies like VMware, Indeed, Stability AI. What originally drew you into the world of mobility?
Well, I kind of fell into it. I like to say that people who get into global mobility either love it or they know pretty quickly they don't. But when I was with Motorola early in my career, they relocated me from Tennessee back to Texas, where I'm from, and it just was not a job that I loved. I was a logistics analyst in semiconductor parts. And I found out if I found another job within Motorola that I would not have to repay my relocation. My relocation cost. And so I found another job in the Global Mobility Group with a lovely woman who I still adore named Susan Kubiesa. And I was one of the ones who fell in love with mobility and just was very lucky to keep a career in this space and advance and work with some really great companies.
Sounded like you had a good mentor there, and as you've kind of
Very.
progressed in the field, I'm sure you've been a mentor to many. That's
It's one of the things that gets me out of bed in the morning is is mentoring and helping people find their superpowers and apply them in the best way possible.
that's wonderful. So you've also run a glass blowing studio and you taught
Yes.
jewelry making. How
Yes.
did those creative experiences really influence your approach to problem solving in mobility and HR?
I believe it keeps my right brain exercised. I like to push the envelope as much as possible within the boundaries of the law. There's a lot of law that goes into moving people globally, especially when it comes to tax and immigration. And so I think it helps me be more flexible when coming up with solutions and problem solving than thinking about the mobility problems in black and white.
So you get to think outside the box. And
Yes.
if I could for a moment, with knowing from you're from West Texas, did any of those influences of West Texas, New Mexico, influence some of your jewelry creation?
I think they do influence a lot. And there's a jewelry designer in Odessa named Sonia Haney. She's also an artist and was an art teacher for a long time. And she has a line of silver missions. And her work has had a lot of influence with what I do. But one of the things that I doodle when I'm trying to problem solve and do mobility things is our jewelry designs. So I come up with some really good designs. Well, I don't know how good they are to other people, but for me, some of the stuff, some of my favorite pieces I've doodled when trying to problem solve in the mobility space.
So you have something that, I'm sure you'd still do it as a hobby. So you have some
Yeah.
designs to look at.
Yes.
Pretty
Yeah.
cool. So we initially started talking about a week ago or more, and we were talking about scheduling headaches when we were dealing with candidates. So scheduling is tough enough domestically, but when you add relocation, visas, multiple time zones, it's a whole new level of scheduling. What's the biggest scheduling pain points that you've seen in global mobility?
I think one of the biggest reasons for scheduling pain points are that a lot of times hiring managers and employees are ready to move tomorrow. They're ready to be doing whatever their job is in that new country really quickly. And a lot of times they don't take into consideration the timing that it takes, especially to get a work visa. Um, People are used to traveling on tourist visas and they can get those, or maybe they can travel just on their passport. And getting a work authorization is so much more complex. And depending on the nationality or the passports that the employee or new hire holds, in combination with the country where they're going and going to work, that can also have some impact on the length of time it takes to get someone that authorization. So that's one of my big ones is scheduling and planning for the immigration piece. I feel like the other pieces fall into place, but it's really planning for that timing that it takes to get the work authorization.
And do you find that those sometimes it's the countries that you deal with, that some may be quicker to get work visas than others, and maybe is it because the relationship is somewhat reciprocal? Like the United States has certain requirements for those countries, and thus it's kind of a reciprocal
Yes,
approach.
I think there are two things that influence the timing of getting work authorization. One is the relationship that that country has, that the two countries have, absolutely is impactful. An example of that in, say, the US, someone coming into the US, once they've gotten an H visa, for instance, they have to then go into the green card process most of the time. Someone from, say, Canada may be able to get a green card in 18 months, where someone who might be a Chinese national or an Indian national, that might take them 6 to 10 years. So there's a lot of influencing factors, but another thing that I've seen before is the labor force in the country. So I did a lot of movement between the US and Japan when I was at Indeed. They were a Japanese owned company, and so Japan's workforce, they were, when they're seeing that they don't have enough people in uh, say technology, they will open up more visas and allow visa processing to go faster. So that can also have an impact.
So you can you share a story along that line where scheduling breakdowns jeopardize a relocation or a new hire? How did you
Yeah.
step in and kind of help to solve that?
Well, this one happened in the role that I'm currently in. This happened just before I got here, but they handled it probably like I would have. An employee and a manager decided they needed someone to move from the US to Australia. Gung ho employee, ready to get going, went to Australia before having work authorization. So, first of all, we work with the immigration attorneys to see is there anything that can be done to expedite the process. Then we ended up having to put the employee, he had to take his leave because it was an employee, not a new hire. So he had some leave built up. So he took all of his PTO, his vacation time. And then after that, he actually had to go on unpaid leave for 30 days until his visa came through. So sometimes, um, a lot of it's about education and making sure that employees and hiring managers really understand that just because you could travel to a location and maybe check your email while you were there, it's not the same as getting a full work authorization and being hired to that entity. So that had a lot of impact, I'm sure, on that individual. It had an impact on anybody in that role. So it's very important to plan for the timing and to work with the professionals in your company and their immigration attorneys to do things correctly and in the right time.
What a key point. That can be put everybody into a hard situation, and particularly the
Right.
employee. I mean, enthusiasm sometimes gets the best, or desire to
Yeah,
get going, right?
exactly.
How about the global mobility landscape for talent acquisition agencies and corporate HR leaders who are listening? What do most people get wrong about global mobility?
They think of it as administrative and not strategic. And I think that a lot of programs are set up administratively, and so it becomes a really expensive administrative cost. And when that's can be negative for a company is if someone just wants to move or, and a manager wants to be nice and allows that, that is a big expense to move someone from country to country. So I like to talk to leaders about thinking about mobility in a more strategic way, offering mobility to people with specific skill sets that you can't get and you need them in another location. It could be an attractor for that type of skill set too. Let's thinking about AI. Sometimes when I worked at Stability, we needed to get people into the UK. And so, yes, you want to invest in people with the talent that you need. But say moving someone at a more entry career sales position, you can hire those folks typically locally. So that's not an investment that someone would want to make. So when you start spending those dollars and investing in talent and talent at the right level, in I just lost the word, in just the experience, bringing that corporate experience with them. That's an investment that's going to get some return. And I think companies and leaders sometimes don't think to use mobility in those strategic ways. I think some other ways are bringing mobility in if you're opening a new entity. Now, you may see a bright, shiny entity, low cost. This is going to be great. We can get the labor, all the things, and then, oh no, all of a sudden it's a hard place to get immigration. It might take 6 months, or maybe they don't have the infrastructure to house the people that you want to bring in. Those are things that your global mobility experts can help with.
Thank you. And so what are the biggest bottlenecks in mobility today? Is it immigration, housing? You kind of touched on some of this with the immigration, or tax compliance, or is it scheduling?
All of the above. I still think it's scheduling and understanding the timelines of when things happen is one of the big bottlenecks. Another thing that's really disrupted the industry is remote working. So once a company decides what their remote working strategy is, are they going to relocate people to the offices if they're mandating they come in? Um, then then does it become an administrative cost instead of a strategic cost? I'm not sure, but I do think it's scheduling, understanding when you need people there, and then planning for the timeline of getting that immigration. So if you think about, it takes probably at minimum, a lot of places 3 months, just to 3 to 6 months, everything's behind right now to get work authorization. You can start planning the relocation in the background. So that the time it takes to get immigration, if you need it, gives you time to start planning the relocation piece. So I don't think the relocation piece is as hard. There are certain locations. Dublin is one example of that. They have great tax positions for companies to come in, but it's flooded Dublin and the surrounding area. So I know in the last few years, housing for people has been pretty tough because it's expensive, and there wasn't enough housing for a while. I think they're catching up now. So mobility is a lot about looking at the location, the timing, the job. Tax is always going to be there. Absolutely. I also have to think about that for compliance sake, but I wouldn't say that the tax compliance is one of the bottlenecks.
It's a lot of moving parts, it sounds
Right.
like. So what's the hidden cost to poor planning when it comes to mobility?
Fixing things later. um, it, to me, that a lot of times the hidden costs are going to be case specific. But if you're looking at big picture, I think most companies don't know their program's total cost. So you have immigration cost; those are pretty clear. They're government fees, and then you have your attorney's fees on top of that. You have relocation management companies who are going to set up your housing and etc. And there's the tax piece. So, but what companies a lot of times don't see or aren't considering in their total cost are the tax gross ups that aren't being fed through one of their vendors. So let me put this another way. They're collecting data from their tax provider, their relocation provider, their immigration provider, and that data they consolidate. A lot of times companies forget where they're grossing up through payroll, and so they're not necessarily looking at the total cost of their program. Moving people, one of the big hidden costs would be social tax. And I think a great example of this was during COVID, people were wanting to move from country to country. Leadership would come to my team and say, hey, can we move Greg from Ireland to France? Looks like from the comp ranges, the compensation would be pretty similar, maybe, 2 to 5,000 euros difference. That would be great. But if you look at the total cost, the social taxes in France would cost the corporation another 40,000 euros because of the employment laws and social taxes that had to be paid. So It's not necessarily a relocation cost, but it's a cost that can be impacted by relocation that companies should look at when they're looking to move people.
Okay, that's a great explanation. Because when you said social costs initially, I thought people costs, but I'm sure that there's a cost there too, right?
Right, right. Like here, it would be FICA or the Social Security portion that a company has to pay.
Gotcha. So, talent mobility experts, officers, fractional leadership in the global mobility space. Why do companies use that instead of actually having a department head? What would be a good example or reason to use that?
One reason would be programs in the middle of change and change management where they had maybe a good program or a lump sum program because they just moved. They didn't move very many people. Maybe their volume was low. At a certain point, volume is going to kick up and they're going to need more than just a person in HR who has mobility as 10% of their scope, right? That's where a fractional leader can come in and build the right program for a company. I'm currently in a fractional gig, and their last mobility leader went to a great opportunity, and they are in that space of their program worked for a while and very solid, but their volume has increased, their locations have increased, and so they've brought me in to make sure that the team's workloads are disseminated out correctly and we're with the right providers and build in efficiencies. So that's when you might bring in a fractional leader in mobility.
And then you can also set up a whole program, right? As far as all the policies and related guidelines for.
Yeah, that's a great example. So at Stability, when I went there, they had their employees were working with their own immigration attorneys. So one of the things that I did there is I consolidated their immigration program, got them set up with one immigration provider, had them set up with a relocation vendor if they needed it, and then also wrote their policies, went through those policies with legal. And because they were small enough and weren't anticipating large volume, I was able to build collateral and one pagers for HR and for hiring managers. Here are the steps you need to take if you hire someone who needs sponsorship or needs to be moved. And that way they now have a foundation that is going to be compliant from the beginning. They wouldn't need to bring someone in to help fix things that had gone awry, which is another reason you might bring in someone in a fractional level. Maybe there are some issues or some compliance issues. You need your team to continue to move people. You could bring someone in fractionally for that project work.
And what's the biggest challenge to scaling your firm right now? Is it awareness, budgets, a resistance to change, or even lead generation? What's the most challenging thing?
Challenging for me. I've been extremely lucky because I've been in mobility so long. I've built a large network over the course of my career. So for me, it's juggling new clients coming in and the timing of that. And so what I'm doing is building my internal network of consultants that I'm passing some work off to. So I think that's the hardest for me. It's not necessarily finding the clients, it's making sure I have the time to work with all the clients that I want to work with. I do know some people though in this space who are struggling with lead generation.
So you've built something that's basically organic because it's just the length and the connections. Your network is
Absolutely.
such that you have referrals through the experience or word of mouth.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
It's kind of old school, right? but but
It
it's
works,
working for me right now. Yeah.
right? Yeah. It also speaks to your effectiveness
Thank
and
you.
how people view you. So that's wonderful to see. That's the biggest part, right, of your reputation. So what do you
Yes.
see is the biggest opportunity for disruption in mobility services?
Wow, I could get in trouble with this one. I I think the traditional relocation management companies are maybe not as long for this world. Um, everybody's looking at AI. I think there are absolutely ways to utilize AI when it comes to agents in mobility that will allow the consultants talking with your employees to spend more time with those employees and on the important pieces of the move. I think there's still a lot of hand holding in this space that needs to be done, but there's so much administrative work that comes with mobility that I think agents are going to be doing more if they're not already
Hmm.
doing.
You think that's like AI enabled compliance or something like that?
I think compliance is a piece of it. I think it's maybe booking corporate housing and doing some of the administrative work. Booking tr- booking travel might be one of them. Just there's so many pieces when it comes to mobility. And one of the ways that I'm using AI right now is analyzing program data. So when I get a new client, I can feed in quarterly business review data, spend data, and have AI analyze it for me, where it would have taken me hours to figure out volume by country and spend by country. And I'm getting AI's help to do that in minutes. And so it's giving me a big picture of my clients' programs really fast. And it's saving them a lot of money from my time analyzing to being able to take that data immediately and start implementing change.
That's very neat. Yeah, a lot of people have seen that there are certain low workloads being scaled down pretty drastically by using AI tools. So that's wonderful to hear. How are competitors approaching this space of mobility, global mobility, and how is talent mobility experts differentiating yourselves?
I like to differentiate talent mobility experts, one with my reputation. Um, I just care so much about what I'm delivering to my clients. But I think what else separates me is I think there's enough to win for everybody. So I actually talk to my peers, and I have one person in the UK. I'm like, hey, I have someone who needs to do some work in the UK. I'm a little too busy for it now. And I trust the way that he works is similar to the way that I do. And we share that way. So we're not business partners, but I just feel like there's enough mobility and enough need that we can all share, we can all help each other be more successful. Mobility is not one of those industries that has a big secret recipe, right? It's like it's different than a lot of industries because we do a lot of sharing of best practices and hey, have you had this come up before? How did you deal with it? And I think that's one thing that really attracts me to this industry is we're a lot of people who like to help each other. Um, and yeah, I took a really long time, Greg, to answer that question.
Yeah, very good. No, that's insightful. So, what you've relocated everyone from Fortune 100 executives to Edward Snowden's team. What's one relocation story you'll never forget?
Never forget when Dell went into North Carolina to set up a new computer factory, fab. And one of the reasons they did that is because of all of the furniture factory worker talent there. So they needed that machine talent. And so I chartered a 747 on my corporate card, and it was to relocate temporarily those people from North Carolina. We flew to Tennessee and dropped off a few, and they worked in the Tennessee factory for about 6 weeks. And the rest of them flew to Austin and trained hands on in the fabs in Austin before we flew them all back. And there were, I believe, 42 seats on that plane. And two-thirds of those employees had never been on a plane before. So it was a lot of fun. We also coordinated their housing, their rental cars for them, how to get to and from work. But that is one that I'll never forget, and not a lot of my peers can say that they've done that either.
Yeah, that is incredible. We think about
Yeah,
just what comes to mind is what is the reward points got to be with that, right?
thought about that back then.
Yeah. But I guess part of HR too is, did you have any of those employees who'd never been on the plane that you have to kind of provide some assistance? Did anybody have fear of flying or any type of phobias that way? Or
Yeah, They were anxious, but it was our plane. So we scheduled some games in the air. We actually had a separate catering company come in, and so we had a little bit better food than plain food. And so we kind of made it fun and light, and people were really happy to have that opportunity to get this new work and then bring it back to that area.
So I'm assuming this was that's a cool story, but I'm assuming that the move of Edward Snowden's team was a little less eventful, but it is the elephant
Yeah.
in the room, so we must ask what happened there.
Well, it was actually my team who moved him. So, um, when I was at Dell, that's when all the Ed Snowden stuff started coming up, and when he went to Russia. And one of the guys on my team called me. He's like, "Are you watching the news?" I'm like, "What's going on?" And he said, "We moved Ed Snowden last year," or something. And so that's, I don't know, is that a feather in the cap? But it's a very recognizable name, and so we did relocate him for Dell.
All the interesting people and situations that we go through in our careers, right?
Yeah.
So talk about influence and impact. We think about things that we've done before for companies, and sometimes we take it for granted our skill set that we have, and then we go to a new company, and we can have a huge impact just because they never had somebody maybe with the training that we have, right? So you reduce attrition, save millions at a company like at Indeed with internal mobility programs. What lessons from that success are you applying now as you do your consulting work?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think one of the things I've been really lucky with in my career is I've gone from every company I've gone to is a little bit smaller than the one before. So I'm taking big company knowledge and being able to apply that in the next level. I think what I've really learned about that internal mobility piece of what I've done is to understand the company's culture and understand how they want to keep their best talent internal. So when I talk about how I help with attrition, I helped build internal mobility programs at both VMware and Indeed. And what that means is it has really nothing to do with global mobility. It has to do with keeping the best talent within your company or umbrella of companies. And it's more about how managers can or can't poach each other, how long you have to stay in a role before you can look at another role internally. What are the workflows in the technology, the HR technology, to move that person around from job to job, manager to manager? And that might include a relocation. It may include immigration. But the most fun one that I got to work on was when I was at VMware. I had been at Dell, and then Michael Dell bought VMware. And so VMware became part of Dell Technologies. So before that, VMware was part of EMC. I guess Dell bought EMC. So EMC had several different entities under their corporate umbrella. And so we built out what we were calling the Interfederation Mobility, Intermobility project, I guess. And that was to keep the best talent within the EMC Federation. And it was really great when Dell bought EMC and became Dell Technologies. We applied that same structure or foundation of the interfederation movement to Dell Technologies to still help keep the best talent. And what that looks like too is keeping a service record for someone so they don't lose the time they worked at one entity to go to the next one. So let's say if you work there 10 years and you get to go on sabbatical, you you get to keep that service record that you've had. So you get to maybe move RSUs from one company to the other or keep them. So there was a lot that went into that, but that was very fun. And I think that's something that a lot of knowledge that I've taken into the next companies that I'm working with.
Yeah, that's wonderful too. It does benefit the people working there that have been working hard, and they can keep that vested interest that they have.
Yeah.
Yep. keep it going. So you have conflict resolution in your background. So how
Mhm.
often do you find yourself mediating between companies, employees, and vendors? And when you're in that moment, what's your philosophy?
I use it daily. My husband calls it my Jedi mind tricks. But so I think about conflict resolution all the time. I use it when, say, negotiating contracts. I use it especially in escalations. When someone is relocating, there's so much stress in relocation, right? And so we use it a lot there. I think my approach to conflict resolution is one, neutralizing the situation and trying to get the emotion taken out. Like let's put the facts on the table. Especially with relo, like I said, can be so emotional and stressful. I like to pull the facts to the top and try to tamp down the emotion in the situation. And then I love when we can meet in the middle. Like, I believe there's so much opportunity for meeting in the middle on situations instead of just, again, going back to that earlier black and white answer. I don't see things in black and white. I see things in gray and color and all different shades. So I think that those are the two main things that I approach conflict resolution with: neutralizing the situation and looking at all different ways to come to some sort of compromise. Compromise is where I was going with that.
And that's often what it is, right? Each one giving up something to get to a kind of
Yeah.
middle ground, if you would. So we think about the future of global mobility. How do you see AI and automation changing global mobility in, say, the next 5 years?
I think in data collection, it's already changing mobility. There's so many data sources, internal, external. We had talked a little bit about that before. So I see it transforming the amount of work that leaders are going to have to do in that reporting space. That's always been such a time drain. I can see AI agents getting to the point where they can almost consult with the employee. I hate to say that, but I love technology, and I think that we can get there in some spaces. I think in the procurement space, that AI is going to have a big play in negotiating contracts and getting those done quicker. Sometimes they take quite a long time. So I think those are some of the big disruptors that I would like to see. And then once we have some trend data, one of the hardest things in mobility, and this comes up with every client, it's been in every program. I wish I had a crystal ball, because forecasting how many people you need to move, when you're going to need to move them, are the business strategies going to change mid-year that will impact either needing to move more people or less people. It's extremely hard to forecast how many people you're going to need to move. I hope that AI will be able to do some better forecasting than, say, us as humans would be able to do, just by being able to pull some of that historic data and then looking at other factors.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of data out there already. So
Yeah,
what's been done in the past, even within an organization or even similar organizations, maybe in the same industry, but that
yeah. Or even, hey, we're going to shift our hiring strategy this way, and then AI can help pinpoint what that might look like from a mobility standpoint, even on that small scale. Maybe not how many people do you think we're going to move next year, but with some certain inputs, I think we can do a better job at forecasting with AI.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So remote and hybrid work kind of exploded post COVID. How is that reshaping mobility programs now?
I think a lot of the leaders are owning big pieces of the return to work and remote flex working programs. So, what those look like, flex working looks almost like a short term assignment, but without any benefits. And companies are looking at how long can we allow a, an employee to sit in another entity with minimal risk. Some companies say we have no tolerance for that. Some companies might say you can work from another country up to 90 days. And it's reshaped mobility because we already had the tools to track people where, and when I say track, I don't mean like I know where you're sitting every day, but to track time in country, out of country for, say, tax compliance, immigration compliance, etc. So I think we already have the tools to help manage those programs. So it's really up to leadership to understand what they want their return to office or flex working policy or guidelines to be, but know that your global mobility team has the tools to help you manage that and stay compliant within those programs.
There's a lot of stuff involved there, and it just kind of reminded me of something. Are people put in situations with work visas where at times they're working in a country and they're getting close to having to renew their visa and they have to leave for a certain period of time? Because something you said there kind of reminded me of something.
Yes. Um, that does happen, and we even with even pre AI, and we had lots of different technology that helps us track the exact day and status that all of our employees are in at all times, and then we have countdowns to this visa will expire or the person needs to leave in this many days, and so that type of planning, because it's so different in each country, is in place. And you just have to be on top of that all the time.
The details like that.
Yes.
So, if a TA leader is listening today and has never before moved talent globally, but now they need to get up to speed, what's that first step that they should take to prepare to lead an organization that has, say, a global mobility group?
Say make sure that you include global mobility in that entity opening team or whatever they're going to call that. Because one of the things going into countries, and I know we like to be so US centric, this is not something that is in the US, so companies don't think about this. Other countries, just because you open an entity and you have a legal entity and you can pay tax and make payroll, that does not mean that you can sponsor someone. So I have seen where companies, let's say, have gone in, this is an example, gone into Mexico, they set up an entity, they started hiring, and they were hiring local, but all of a sudden they needed to get someone from their US entity to help set that Mexican entity up. They had not registered to sponsor, and sometimes that takes months, and I think it set them back maybe 6 months. So bring in your mobility team, talk about immigration. Are you going to sponsor? Even if you think you're not, if you're going into another country, you're probably going to bring in leaders even for a short term. You'll need to know what you need to do to register and get set up to sponsor in that country. Your mobility team can help you with that.
Yeah, wonderful tips there. So thank you for that. I'm sure that'll be helpful for many. What's one practical tip? I'm talking about tips. Would you give HR leaders or agency owners struggling with scheduling headaches today around global mobility?
Call you, Greg, and get them to help you with that. Um, I honestly, I would have to know a little bit more about the program to be able to be able to talk about that. I Depending if you're talking about scheduling and immigration, you really shouldn't have immigration scheduling problems if you have a good, solid relationship with your immigration firm and your provider. They already have all the tools for that. But I would say I will change my answer to educate your internal hiring managers more. Because if those hiring managers knew more about how long it takes to, say, get work authorization or get someone moved to another country, they would quit making promises to employees that they can't follow through on.
Excellent point. So listeners want to learn more about the talent mobility experts. What's the best place for them to connect with you?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn or email me at Rebecca@talentmobilityexperts.com.
Excellent. Rebecca Stevens, Talent Mobility Experts. It's been wonderful to have you as a guest on the Argosy podcast today. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, Greg. I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun.
You're very welcome.